I'm Richard Asmus, and I'm the organizer for the Southwest Ohio. And Ellen and Ted, would you wave and share your name and where you're from?
I'm Ellen Greenbush, and I'm from Northwest Ohio, Port Clinton.
And I'm Ted Kanapke. I'm in Columbus, Worthington specifically, but as I said, we have members pretty much surrounding the metropolitan area.
Yeah. And Marnie, would you introduce yourself briefly?
Yep. I'm Marnie Walsh. I'm from Vermont, but I recently moved to Boston and Fenway, and I'm the empowerment coordinator with American Promise.
Yes, we are so fortunate that with the national organization to have a empowerment coordinator working so closely with us. I mean, it's really special. And so a lot of the technical things, the support, the logistics, the insights from the center of the planning groups there at the national headquarters of American Promise, that's something that Marnie brings to us. And our work here is, this is exciting that each of us have had Central Ohio and Northwest and South Ohio. We've had individual chapter meetings, but I believe, help me if I'm wrong, this is the first time with an open meeting for American Promise Ohio to have a session with all of Ohio rather than our chapters. And I think this is a big step. This is a strategy step to, especially during the pandemic, but maybe otherwise, that we can work as a state, on the state level as a group, rather than the chapters. Because then we try to coordinate with chapters, and it oftentimes was a little bumpy trying to keep all the coordination between the chapters. This way now, with Zoom particularly, we can just meet as a state. And that's the experiment here. Thank you for coming to the first session of American Promise Ohio. Of course, we're working to get support and all the foundational parts together to pass a 28th Amendment for getting big money out of politics, for overcoming Citizens United. And that is a strategy that is so important, because other kinds of strategies of changing things in policy or legislation can be overturned quickly. This is really going to be the more ultimate, not easily changed strategy to get big money out of politics. We want to work on some of our goals here today and organizing. The strategy we're trying to embark on here too is to form teams in order to achieve the goals for American Promise Ohio. And we'll introduce those teams in a few moments. But and then invite you, this is an action group, to invite you, if you wish, to join one or more of the teams so that we can move forward. We're going to meet regularly now, American Promise Ohio. It's exciting. We can come from all over the state and build up a movement for Ohio to make this happen and be ready when the Congress makes the amendment ready. And then it has to be ratified by states so that Ohio is ready to ratify when that time comes. I want to honor the leadership of Ellen, who is our leader for American Promise Ohio and has been for some time and has worked so diligently and skillfully in this area and working closely with national. And so this next section of our agenda, Ellen and Ted from the Columbus area will lead us into some of the background of where we are, give us where are we right now, and where are the opportunities for this change, this movement? What are the opportunities we have? So take it away, Ellen and Ted.
Yes, so thanks, Richard. American Promise nationally started in 2016, and it still has a 10-year mission, one specific goal, and that is to pass and ratify a 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to get big money out of elections. So we're in this for a long game, right?
Yes.
So
2026, it's right around the corner.
July 4th, the 250th birthday of our country is the point where we want to have this amendment ratified. So we started in 2017 in Port Clinton, and my friend Nancy Gurney, who's on this call, was instrumental in getting our group going in Port Clinton, along with about 3 or 4 other people. We started lobbying our legislators. We started with our Ohio House rep and our Ohio Senate rep. We were very successful with those 2 people. And we did get them to agree to the wording of our amendment. But then the 2018 elections happened, and we all know what happened in Ohio after that. Our 2 representatives actually were no longer in office, and we had a different Speaker of the House, different in many, meanings of the word. And we didn't get anywhere with getting anything done with money in politics in our state legislature. So when American Promise started in 2016, they called it phase 1. And phase 1 really was just to see if this was a viable goal. Would this take off? Would people organize in the states? Would we get states to support this amendment? And in 2020, about the middle of the year, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences finished a 2-year report called Our Common Purpose. And in that report, one of their recommendations was the American Promise Constitutional Amendment. And they recommended that be ratified by 2026. So at that point then, American Promise decided that yes, this is a viable movement. We have many chapters in almost every state. We have 22 states who have pre-ratified, quote unquote, but 22 states that have said if this comes back to them, they will be ready to ratify it.
How many are needed, Ellen, just to give everybody an idea? When that time comes, how many states need to ratify in order to make the amendment established?
You need 3/4 of the states.
38,
So,
Richard, right?
Yeah. So this will have to pass by 2/3 a vote of Congress, both houses, sent to the states, and then 3/4 of the states will have to ratify. Yeah. So that's a big lift. But we have passed constitutional amendments, 27 other times. And so that is our goal. And now we're moving into the ready to ratify phase. And that simply means that we're going to be focusing a little different than we did before. Richard, you said, before we were broken up more into geographic teams, but now that we have Zoom, we're able to really zero in more on tasks so that we're all not reinventing everything in our own geographic areas. Let's see, Ted, did you want to add anything?
Well, I think, as you alluded, it'll make us more efficient, we think, rather than all 3 doing similar things. One of the things that many of you probably know, but several of us were on a Zoom call here recently with a Representative Dean Phillips of Minnesota. Very impressive young man. I say young, everybody's young to me, but probably in his 40s, I would guess. One of the things that came up in that Zoom conference was a reiteration of something we've heard. There have been surveys done of what percentage of people in the country are in favor of campaign finance reform, specifically the 20th Amendment. And we keep hearing somewhere around 70 to 80%. Little lower with Republicans, but still well over 2/3. And a number of times we've heard, well, that's just general. What about Ohio? And we heard in that meeting from a lady who specializes in data. And of the 82% of the people who were polled, 82% had an opinion, 18 obviously just didn't know. Roughly 80%, 78% of the people had an opinion said, yes, we need to do something. And this is in Ohio. So we think that's very important. A lot of things have happened in the last year, nationally and in the state. We've had our own $61 million bribe. We found out why we didn't make any progress, as Alan mentioned. Several of us met with key people in Ohio, including the speaker's aide, who was very quick to say, no, the speaker will never buy into campaign finance. Well, we found out in spades why. And it's not just here in Ohio, it operates at the federal level. Money is power. One of the things that Dean Phillips told us is that money, they're finding, is the root of just about every problem we have. The reason we can't get beyond, whether it's healthcare, environment, pharmaceutical prices, you name it, the problem is almost always is money and the power that goes with it, and a reluctance to give that up. Even people like the speaker and the former president of the Senate knows that Democrats are collecting as much money of that 14 billion that was spent in the last election. Democrats are now raising as much as Republicans. So it's not just about the money, it's about the power that comes with it. But we think the time is really ripe. That 5.5 years we still have left toward the 2026 is still there, but things seem to be accelerating. In fact, Dean Phillips' staff was quoted as saying that what was considered impossible is now becoming inevitable. And I've had a number of people who I've talked to who are pretty savvy in this area who've said, well, it's a great idea. We do need to do something about campaign finance, but it's just not going to happen. It's impossible.
One of the things that people could be confused about coming up is that HR 1 has a controlling, regulating money in politics. And then there's also the HJ Res 1. Would you briefly just help us get clear that we can't go into all the details, but get clear about that? Because one is kind of a solution that American Promise supports, and one is good stuff, but isn't an ultimate solution.
Yes, so HR 1 is for the People Act, and you've probably all read about it or heard about it, and it's a very huge bill that deals with basically three things. It deals with expanding voting rights and gerrymandering, which is really important because already some of the states are starting to try to block voting access again. Mm-hmm. The second thing that it does, it works toward, it has some things in it about ethical government. So having the FEC oversight of the campaign problems, putting limits on lobbyists, people joining corporate boards, things like that. And then there is a third part that's about money in politics. But that part of HR 1 really deals with transparency. And it has to only be able to deal with transparency and oversight because of the Citizens United Supreme Court ruling in 2010. Because that was a Supreme Court ruling that basically allowed any amount of money to be put into elections, that can only be overturned by another Supreme Court ruling or a constitutional amendment. So House Joint Resolution 1 was introduced January 4th. That is the constitutional amendment. That is a 3-sentence amendment.
Wow.
Very simple, but it is basically stating that Congress and the state have the right to regulate the amount of money that goes into that affects elections. So although American Promise really does think that all of those issues in HR 1 are important and essential, our focus is on the constitutional amendment.
Yeah. And so one of the things that gets me confused is they're both called number one, HR 1 and HRJ or HJ Res 1.
Yeah.
How do we remember the difference? Or is it just we have to just memorize those two? Or what is your suggestion to keep them straight?
It's a joint resolution. So it's a resolution that's going to include the House and the Senate. It hasn't been included in the Senate yet. It's so that's one way to remember it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The J means joint, right?
It means joint. Yes.
This is the joint in the resolution.
Yes.
And
it's been introduced into the House. It has one Republican co-sponsor. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, American Promise and this issue of money in politics is cross-partisan. And by cross-partisan, I mean just what Ted was saying, is that Republicans, Democrats, Independents all favor getting money out of politics, close to 80% in almost every study that's done. And the study that Ted quoted was just done right after the 2020 election in Ohio. So that is like very recent data.
Great. Good going. Let's see if we can open up to questions or comments. We want to make it, we don't have, we want to end at 6. It's a Friday night. We want to honor your night. But we also want to see about any participation. So we have 2 real experts here with Ted and Ellen. Who would have a question or a comment about how we're setting it up in 2021 and what the goals are? Who's first?
I just want to say thank you to you guys for doing all of this for the last 5 years almost. It's an incredible project, and the work that you've already put in, hats off to you all. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Who was that speaking? I couldn't tell.
Nancy Larson.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. Thank you.
David, you have something to add.
Yes, thank you. Dave McDermott from Cincinnati. I was handing out the fix-it version of a proposed amendment under the basis that it was not as aggressive and maybe more receptive to Ohio politicians, which are more conservative than many states in the country. So question for Ted and for Ellen, what is the form that you are currently pushing for the amendment?
It's not the fix-it amendment. We worked on that one for a while, but then when the House drew up the constitutional amendment, we are now supporting those three points. If you want to look it up, you can go to congress.gov and put in House Joint Resolution 1. But it is very simple.
Very succinct. Yes, it is.
Very succinct.
Yeah. In fact, Marnie, the letter that Jeff Clement, I don't know if everybody knows who Jeff is. He's really the leader of the whole organization going back to the beginning. But Jeff, on January 21st, I think it was, sent a letter out. And I think there was a link in there that took us to what Ellen's referring to. It also gave some testimony from some key people. And I thought that was really very enlightening. It was very helpful. We could, I don't know, Marnie, I want to create extra work for you, but that might be something that we could forward to the people who are involved today.
You'll get a follow-up. That's a good point,
Right.
Ted. We'll get a follow-up with some of these links. Thank you for being part of this, but part of it, of course, is to keep it moving. We're creating momentum to move forward. Who would have another question or comment? Yes, Marjorie.
Hi, Marjorie Fox from Cincinnati. I'm wondering who is the sponsor of the joint resolution that we have? And I know you've been working to get other sponsors or people who would support it. Do we have any sponsors at all, especially Democrats?
And you're talking about the constitutional amendment, the federal one. Yes, it's, the sponsors are Ted Deutsch, John Katko, who's a Republican. Let's see, I wrote these down, and there are two more. There are 58 sponsors.
Okay,
The only one from Ohio right now is Joyce Beatty,
Mhm.
but Marcy Kaptur does support it, as does Tim Ryan. They probably just haven't signed on to it yet.
Yeah, this is all new. This
It's
is all new in the new Congress. Yes.
I'm,
So it's Ted Joyce, Deutsch, Jim McGovern, Jamie Raskin, and John Katko, who are the major sponsors. And then there are 58 others.
Yeah.
Last year, when it was introduced, there were something like 200 and some, all Democrats, but John Katko.
Yeah. Marjorie, did you want to follow up with another point?
yeah, that's good to know and, good to circulate in writing sometime. Doesn't have to be now, but I guess I was wondering, who do we target in the Ohio legislature? We have in our Southwest Ohio, we talked to several reps, and I think Bridget Kelly, a Democrat, said she would support it, but she wouldn't sponsor it. So I'm wondering, do we have any, who are the sponsors we already have in the,
In the federal or for
no,
the
in Ohio?
In Ohio.
Well, there's a long story to that, which I'll try to make really short. But over the past few years, Nancy Gurney and Ted and I have spoken to every Republican, a member of leadership in our state house and Senate, or one of their aides, trying to get somebody to introduce this resolution saying that Ohio will be ready to ratify. And we have not been successful. And we do not think we're going to be successful in 2021. And so that's why we're sort of revising our group a little bit to focus on teams so we can reach out to other groups beside our state legislators.
Right.
And we'll talk about more about that toward the end when we talk about teams. But as it is right now, probably the most effective thing we can do is near elections to get candidates to sign our candidate pledge.
Right. And when the districts are redrawn in the end of this year, in the new elections next year, then we're going to have more of a chance in 2022 in Ohio, because hopefully the Ohio legislature will be more balanced and of party. And the gerrymandering, as everyone knows, pushes candidates to the extreme because they basically get primaried. Since it's a safe district, they get primaried from people more to the right than they might be, or more to the left. So hopefully with the help with the end of gerrymandering in Ohio happening this year, in 2022, we're going to really have a chance to get more congressional support.
That's a good point. And I think it's fair to say, I couldn't prove this, but it's fair to say that the people that are elected Republicans in the state aren't voting for them because they're against campaign finance. They're voting for them because they're voting straight ticket or some of the values that they agree with. But as Richard said, if we can get away from those extremes or convince voters or even Republicans that it's not safe to block on this, then I think we can make some progress. Right now, some of the background work we've done and some of the people we've talked to who are closer to this than we are, have pretty much confirmed that you do not, as a Republican right now, support this or you lose campaign funds. And I've pretty well, again, I couldn't prove that, but we've had enough incremental evidence that that is the case. We were very close with a senator here in Central Ohio last year, And then all of a sudden, that person did about a 180. And it didn't take too long to figure out why.
Yeah, right.
She was very sympathetic, but 10 days later, couldn't even talk to us about it. So it's really,
She got the word. We're
That's
now
right.
going to shift to bring Marnie in, because Marnie is really, I believe, special in our efforts in 2021 is our citizen empowerment support for the our work here with American Promise. And uh, Marnie, I'm just amazed that here you are as a young, Black, powerful woman, and you're choosing to work with American Promise and getting big money out of the politics. What could you share briefly? What motivates you, and how did you find this path to be a leader for?
Sure. So I graduated college in August, and my focus of study was on police brutality across like different functions, and then like identifying how racism impacts people of color in the criminal justice system. But I wanted to do for myself like more digging, like not necessarily on like the policy issue, but like how are funds being like trickled in to like continue to create this system of oppression. And my professor emailed me this job and was like, you should apply for it because you're great at empowering other people, and it will also provide you a great segue to do more information, to get more information and do research for yourself, and also support chapter members across different states. So here I am after the interview process and everything. But now, just like my work is to obviously support Richard, Ted, Ellen, and other chapter members, but I also wanted to, you know, create more Black visibility within different chapter across the states, and also have conversation about like what Black visibility looks like. So February is Black History Month,
Yes.
but I think it's important to, you know, like obviously liberate and celebrate Black Americans throughout the month, but also like the celebration and receiving information shouldn't just stop in February.
Yes.
It should be 365 days a year to get more information and also better our system and limit racial injustices.
Yeah, as we build this, Marnie, American Promise Ohio, continue to build and create momentum in these next 5 years. What do you suggest? I know you can't represent all young people, but as a young woman, what is your suggestion of how we might invite in, coordinate with young people throughout the state to support the goals of American Promise?
I would say identifying like different topics and see how they intersect with the 28th Amendment. So a lot of my friends care greatly about health inequalities and the lack of access for healthcare in the US. But they didn't necessarily understand like how big money in politics affects that, and that it is creating the system of oppression and limiting people's access to healthcare. So I think like being able to pinpoint certain topics and injustices that, you know, people are passionate about, and then bridging the gap and identifying how the 28th Amendment can essentially get rid of these areas of oppression and create more conversations for everyone throughout our democracy.
Yeah, they can be a solution to the issues or areas of concern that the young people have. If we can connect how dark money stops the solution or hinders, corrupts the solutions that way. Oh, that's something we can really work on this year, I think. Again, I know you can't represent every African-American in the country, but you can give us a perspective that's unique to you and special for you as an African-American. Well, it's the same thing there. How can we be sensitive, alert, inviting to connect with the African-American community in Ohio?
So I'm a big proponent of just listening and hearing people's stories.
Yeah.
I've been working with Sam Daly Harris in terms of like writing down my story of self and then figuring out how I can deliver that in an effective way, which like, again, like it intersects like me being a Black woman, but also working with American Promise. So I'm a big proponent of like listening to people's stories, and then, you know, I would say listen and then react. So, you know, if someone, for example, like I'm passionate about, you know, ending racial injustices and taking and ending police brutality. I don't know when that will ever happen, but that's something like I'm very passionate about, and I will fight till the end to work at that. So just like listening to people's stories and then providing, I guess, like next steps. So
Yeah.
providing how does big money in politics impact XYZ?
Yes. Oh, good. How many states are you a citizen empowerment coordinator for?
I believe 19.
Wow. And what can we
I also
do?
could be wrong.
What can we do to be your pick of the litter among all 19 of these? You know, how do we, you know, when you're pulled in many different directions, what can we do to help your decision to support our concerns more effectively?
Well, I
While
love
she's
working with
thinking,
Ohio.
Richard, I think we already are the pick of her litter. If she's spending,
Don't tell anyone.
No, I
Okay,
was
we
gonna
won't
say,
tell anyone that.
if she's spending as much time with all 19 as she is with us, she's a very busy young lady.
Yeah, yeah.
Seriously, we have had a lot of her time, and she's done a remarkable job of, I can't imagine she's spending as much time with all 19, but go ahead, Marnie, excuse me.
No, it's okay. I would say, like going out of your comfort zone. So, like, I think of the quote, like, it's okay to be uncomfortable. So, kind of
Yeah.
like go with that. You know, venture into topics that you're not necessarily familiar about, but be like, Marnie, how can we, you know, identify how big money in politics relies in this group, and what statewide calls should we do to bring more people on board with American Promise and chapter involvement? I would say
Yeah.
that's my ask.
That's good. Well, we are honored, as Ted says, that you're here today, and we want to continue not overusing. It isn't the competition, I know. Yeah, sure, but we want to keep close to you because you're such a good resource for us. We want to give attention to actions. This isn't. Yeah, David.
You're muted,
I'm
David.
waving to Marnie. I think she's a great asset. I love what she had to say.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yay. That's one of the ways to keep her involved, is to give you lots of good affirmation and challenges. I can tell already from working with you for a few months, Marnie, she loves challenges. And,
I do.
You know, interesting. So we've got to do that in Ohio to make our work right at the edge, so that she's always worried that dedicated to supporting the creative work of our American Promise Ohio. Other comments with Marnie?
I was just going to say, Marnie, of course, money in elections and politics affects people of color more because people of color tend to be in lower socioeconomic classes. They have lower wage type of jobs. And it's a whole issue. Money in politics affects our economic justice, right? Our social justice. And so it would seem like that would be a really powerful motivator, I would think, for us to include, you know, more people of color in our movement, because of the way in which people, you know, are affected that way by the whole money in politics issue.
Along that line, we've also talked about another really fertile area, I think, is young people. My vested interest in this, and Nancy, I appreciate your comment before, but my selfish interest is I have 8 grandchildren, and I'm very concerned about what kind of world they're going to inherit in 25 or 30 years, environment, you name it. And all of them go back to money and power. But that's my selfish reason. In fact, speaking of minorities. I've adopted in retirement the phrase that Martin Luther King was quoted on. He said, "Our life ends the day that we remain quiet about things that matter."
Yeah.
And if I ever become shy about talking to somebody, but I don't belong to either party. I really try to be very nonpartisan and not get pulled into misinformation that's out there in abundance. But if I ever get into a situation where I'm at all reluctant to stand up for something like American Promise, that comes back to me. Your life's going to end the day that you remain quiet about the things that do matter. And nothing more to our kids and our grandchildren than leaving them a better world than we have right now.
Yeah. In this, thank you, Ted. In this, and thank you, Marnie, so much. And I'm so glad we have you as our guide and resource, and creating special things for our work coming up through 2021. The moving to action now, to really make this happen, is actions. Part of the action is learning and connecting as we are now, building relationships. But also there are specific things to do. We're going to just touch briefly on the Citizens Pledge and the Candidates Pledge. And we'll keep coming back to this, and many of you have heard it before, so we don't have to go into it too deeply right now. But Ellen, what is the power or the possibility of the Citizens Pledge, and what should we do coming out of this meeting regarding that?
The Citizen Pledge is a way that every person who goes to the AmericanPromise.net webpage can sign saying that you support a constitutional amendment to get money out of elections and policy decisions. And when you sign that, then you will be included on American Promise's email list, and you can get as involved as you would like to be. American Promise has a lot of trainings nationally, education sessions, chapter groups. So you can get on the mailing list, or you can get more involved if you would like to do that. So it's a way to get into the American Promise movement.
Yes, so if you wish, but also share that with others on social media or with friends to keep building the awareness and the knowledge, is to certainly sign the pledge ourselves, but also encourage others and friends and all. The other pledge is the Candidates Pledge, and I was pleased this week that I set up a conversation about this and other things with Nan Whaley, who is the mayor of Dayton, and who is just leaning at this time to run for the governor position in Ohio. She said she's not announced yet, but she is leaning towards that. And as part of my conversation with Nan, I asked her, I said, are you aware? And she said, yeah, she didn't know the details of American Promise. And I shared with her, the link, and with her campaign political director, who was also there, about it. And she said, oh yeah, I'd be glad to do that. So part of it is the Candidate Pledge. And what is the purpose of the Candidate Pledge as you see it? Ted, would you want to take this one?
Well, I think it puts pressure on their opponent. They're coming out in favor, as a number of people have that we've worked with here in Columbus, and they're coming out in favor of it, supporting it, and we're able to say this is what 80%, roughly 75 to 80% of the voters want to see. And by the way, corruption is the number one issue among swing voters. It's been pretty well polled. So I think that's a start. It puts pressure on their opponent to either come along or face an uphill battle, possibly. So I think it's a win-win. It gives them an advantage and us a chance to build momentum. And we haven't used the word grassroots, but this is certainly going to have to be a grassroots effort. We've got to make inroads wherever we can, and candidates are a visit.
And it's really an earned media opportunity, because American Promise passes this on, and we can pass it on in our own communities. And as I mentioned to Nan, we're certainly going to ask DeWine, maybe he's already been asked, in the past, but we'll certainly ask DeWine, who probably will be her opponent if she chooses to run for governor, if he'd like to sign. And then we can make that contrast. But part of the candidate pledge is in your own neighborhood, in your own city, for mayor, on any level. We can ask candidates, would you be able to do it? And the form is online. You'll see the candidates pledge. We'll put that in as one of the links following our meeting so that you can have that form very easily. And it's simply asking, again, it's part of education too. We have to educate our candidates. Like Nan knew a little, but she doesn't know much. And so to be able to educate more about that and see that opportunity. We're also now beginning this process of meeting monthly. So our next meeting, and this will be in the notes as a follow-up to you, the next meeting will be Thursday, February the 25th from 7 to 8:30. We'll have the meetings be an hour and a half. We're hard workers, and so an hour and a half, you can get a lot done on the Thursday, the 25th, and that'll be the fourth Thursday of each month. So if you don't mind putting that on your calendar, you'll get the notes from here that'll remind you. The fourth Thursday, and the meetings will be action oriented, as this segment is. Certainly some catch up on some unveiling of some of the knowledge pieces that are important for this, but it'll also be participative and collaborative rather than speechifying, maybe more, I hope more participative and collaborative than this session is. We need to establish the foundation for starting here. And we've gotten some participation, but I'd like to increase that participation and all. And then the 3 teams. That's going to be our strategy. And we'd love your feedback if you think it's smart or not. That given the Ohio legislature, as Ellen described, there's not much hope in getting, at this point, of getting many Republicans, and they control so much of the power because of the gerrymander. There's not much hope there. There will be in 2022, but we can reach a lot of people. And so here are the 3 teams that we're looking for. One team is we're calling Healthy Democracy Team, which is like there's a lot of activists working on redistricting in Ohio this year because that's when that's going to happen. For example, On the Line, Common Cause, League of Women Voters, Ohio Environmental Council, Indivisible Groups. Bold New Democracy is a group here in Cincinnati that works on many things, aspects of democracy, improving democracy. But our goal would be to bring in American Promise, to connect the work of American Promise with their goals. It's not forcing them to do anything they're not, but showing those groups how they, by connecting in with American Promise, that they can achieve their goals long-term, think of 2026, but long-term by connecting in with American Promise. And then by forming those relationships, when it's time for ratifying, we've got those relationships ready to go going forward. And I will be the organizer of the Healthy Democracy Team as one of our teams. The second team is Business and Labor. And Ted, would you describe briefly the purpose and who you're addressing with Business and Labor, along with, of course, American Promise and its goals?
Sure. We're looking at labor groups, business groups, chambers of small businesses. Rotary would be a good example. If any of you have connection or belong to Rotary in an area, please let me know. I've made some approaches already here in Columbus. There's Dublin, Worthington, for example. And as some of you may, they have a speaker every meeting. They keep it brief, 15 minutes usually, but I think that's enough to get their attention, raise awareness, and again, recruit at a grassroots level, city councils, people like that.
Labor too. Would labor be a part of that, Ted?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that in passing, right?
Oh, did you? Okay, good.
So if any of you are aware of any of those likely groups, don't hesitate to get a hold of me on it.
That's going to be, that's
well,
second
I was going to say, I think the kind of people we're trying to reach through that team is what would be more traditionally thought of as a Republican group
Right.
of people. So businesses, chambers of commerce, rotaries,
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
corporate heads, just anybody you know with connections
Mhm.
that may not be, that typically tend to be more Republican.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think there's some stereotypes we need to break down there. The U.S. Chamber of
Well,
Commerce
yes,
is different than Chamber of Commerce at the local level. They don't
yeah.
represent small businesses very well. In fact, AmericanPromise.net has been mentioned. Many of you have probably been there, but that's one of the things that the national group has really done in the last year. My perception is that they've really added a lot of resources. They've made that difficult task of making it more accessible. So if you go to AmericanPromise.net, you'll find there is a business area there. I don't remember exactly how it's named, but there are actually presentations in there to businesses, and giving them the why entrepreneurship, for example, is being thwarted by big money.
Yeah.
And other,
So if
go ahead.
that's the second team. Is the first team is healthy democracy and all the teams working on redistricting and voting rights and all that to get them connected in. The second team is business and labor, as Ted described. And the third team is elected officials and candidate teams. Ellen is organizing that team. Give us your vision and your goals for that team, Ellen.
yeah. So first of all, in terms of the candidate pledge, I just want to acknowledge Nancy Larson, who signed our candidate pledge.
Yay!
And when she was running for the House in Ohio.
Way to go.
2021 is going to be municipal elections, mayors, city councils, township trustees, county-wide offices. And so we thought that if we could get people on this team from various parts of the state, that we could start at the grassroots to get some local elected officials some knowledge and signing our candidate pledge. Then we're also going to be getting ready for 2022, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
very exciting. Because we're going to have a big Senate race in Ohio, and we want to make this constitutional amendment an issue in that Senate race. We're also going to have governor race. Richard, you had mentioned potential Democratic, but and DeWine if he doesn't get primaried. So we're going to have those statewide offices, and then again in 2022, we will have redrawn districts. And so we may be able to have more competitive districts where our pledge may be more meaningful if we can get both candidates running for an office to sign. So that's what we're going to be working on in the elected officials and candidates team. We're kind of proud to announce that Nina Turner, who is in the primary for Congressional District 11, just signed our pledge.
Yay!
She's on the American Promise Advisory Board. We also have Marcy Kaptur, who's my congresswoman, Tim Ryan. Those are some of the people that have signed on the national level. Sherrod Brown knows about us. He doesn't sign pledges. But this is sort of what this elected candidate, official and candidate team is going to be working on.
Thank you. So here's the exciting point is that for you to think about these three areas and to join. And the teams will meet. We're hard workers, right? We want to get things done. This is a strategic organizational method to really be effective. So this is an exciting point. So in the chat, for you to put your name, choose one of the three teams or more than one if you're really wild. Healthy democracy, business and labor, and elected officials and campaign teams. So if you would, in the chat, put your name and one of those teams that you would be willing to help with, that you would be willing to be a team member for. There'll be another, if you want to think about this, there'll be another opportunity when the follow-up from this call comes. That'll be another opportunity for you to send in which of the teams you'd like to work with. So again, healthy democracy, business and labor is number 1 team. Number 2 is business and labor. And number 3, elected officials and candidates team. Pay attention to your own passion. Oh, I'd like to make progress to get these people involved. A lot of this is relational organizing. So the teams will meet individually. Of course, you're not required to come to the individual meetings, but then when we come together, then the teams will be sharing what their discoveries are, their accomplishments, their problems. A lot of the work when we come together monthly as a AP Ohio team, a full team, then the individual teams will be part of that.
And
What
we'd really
are-
encourage you, if you know somebody that is busy, I had a number of people tell me they'd love to be on this today, but they can't.
Yeah,
Marnie, I believe we said we would be sending a recording out to everybody. So if you know someone that couldn't, please hook them in and have them somehow get them the recording and encourage them to get involved.
sign up for a team. Yes, this is our strategy. So we have just a few minutes left. I want to make sure that I think we've covered things. Questions, comments, criticisms, encouragements, gripes. Who would like to share first?
This James, I'll jump in quickly. Ellen and Ted and Richard, you guys have great appreciation for pulling all this together. It's a lot of work and we very much appreciate it. And Marnie, a quick challenge. I recently found out about a new local podcast, news broadcast here called the Nathan Ivey Show, Ivey. He promotes Black agenda, essentially,
Yes.
and that's his effort. So if you would be interested in working with me in trying to reach out to his show and his effort, I would very much appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Oh,
that'd be
good.
great.
Great
Good
idea,
partnership.
James.
Good partnership, James and Marnie on that show. Good idea, James. Who's next? Comment, question, encouragement? Are we crazy? Are we on the right track?
This is Ruth, and Marnie, I love the way you share. Thank you for the story idea. And I have family members, my heart sometimes wants to break, that still think we didn't give this past president, whose name I won't even mention, a chance. And so anything that can help us unite around common goals is phenomenal for my family and the
Yes.
many people that I know. So I am, and also young people that I do meet, sometimes they say vote. They're disenfranchised with so many things, and this can offer them hope.
Yeah.
Great point, Ruth.
Thank you.
Very good.
Invite your family to join American Promise, because we're cross-partisan. You can join together to
I
get big money
believe
out
it,
of it.
yeah, I
out
did
of
And that's
that
the thing.
a
We
while
are,
ago. What, please?
we are an issues group. We're not a partisan group. And
That's right.
so that's one way to engage people is around an issue, which can transcend party
That's
eventually.
right. That's a good point. Yes,
that-
thank you.
I
Who is,
think-
let's see if there's
Some-
other questions or comments here from
Follow up on
the
that real
group.
quickly, Richard. Some of you have met Azor Cole. We need to mention him. He's been a tremendous asset to this group, along with Marnie and Jeff Clement, who have mentioned. And Azor, I think, is one of the people has pushed that idea, Ruth, that you touched on there. You don't need to necessarily bring up American Promise right away, but you can. What appeals to somebody who? And I have a family member who is a big supporter of the previous president, and how you can bring up something really what's important to them. Is it healthcare? What might it be? And that's an entree into, okay, how can we get there? What's the obstacle? And it becomes a nonpartisan issue, as Ellen said.
Yeah, thank you. Who's next? David? Or were you asking, put your hand up? Who's next?
I have my hand up, actually. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
sure.
Yes.
This is Mindy.
Hi, Mindy.
Hedges. I am Hi, I have to apologize, first of all. I'm so sorry, but at the beginning of this phone call, I got my car stuck in the snow at the end of my driveway and couldn't get
Oh.
out. So it was all very complicated. So
Yeah.
I apologize, but I'm glad I'm here now. I have worked on this on my own because part of the difficulty that I've had is that the American Promise meetings were all the way in southern Columbus, which was about an hour's drive for me.
Yeah.
And this is a much better opportunity
Oh,
for me to
good.
be
Mhm.
participate. That said, I have spoken to several legislators about this particular issue. And believe it or not, I was shocked that, and they were both Republicans, and I was shocked that I actually perked their interest. And I said it in the chat when I mentioned that people, that Congress, in order to run for any seat, statewide or federal, becomes an issue because they spend at least a third of their time, 33%
Yeah.
of their time fundraising.
Right.
And when you start to talk to them about that, it's an issue that everybody hates. All the legislators hate
Right.
it. And no matter what party you're in.
Thank you.
So that has really gotten me
Good going.
great opportunities for listening.
Yeah, good going. Mindy, I'm sorry to, I don't mean to cut you off, but we are at the end of our time. It's a minute or two after. We want to honor your times. Everyone, you'll have the contact information if you don't have it already for Marnie and Ellen and Ted and myself. And thank you all for coming. Let's make this happen. Working together, we can really make a difference to get the corruption of big money out of elections and out of politics and policy making and lawmaking. We can do it. And American Promise is a really powerful strategy. We can make the difference in Ohio. Thank you all.
Thank
Your
you.
time.
Thank you.
Coming.
Everybody,
Be safe.
great to be with
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
We'll be in touch.